In August of 2014, 18-year-old Kelly Brooks disappeared without a trace on a challenging route in Yellowstone National Park. For 7 years, she was presumed dead, the victim of an accident or a predatory animal. But in November of 2021, she walked into a regular supermarket in the town of Cody, alive but unrecognizable. What she told the police when she was able to speak shocked even experienced detectives. Where she was for those 7 years and what happened to her, you will find out in this video. Enjoy. Some names and details in this story have been changed for anonymity and confidentiality. Not all photographs are from the actual scene. On August 12, 2014, a Tuesday, the sun rose over the northeastern part of Yellowstone National Park, promising another hot and cloudless day. For hundreds of tourists, it was the perfect time to see the famous geysers or herds of bison in the Lamar Valley. But for 18-year-old Kelly Brooks, this morning was the beginning of a journey that was supposed to last only a few hours, but stretched into years of silence. According to her mother's testimony to the rangers, Kelly was an experienced hiker for her age and carefully planned each trip. That day, her goal was to hike the Specimen Ridge Trail, a challenging, unmarked trail known for its petrified forests and breathtaking panoramic views. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, cameras at the entrance to the northern sector of the park captured Kelly's silver sedan. She was alone. According to the checkpoint officer on duty, the girl looked focused and calm. She parked the car on a small gravel lot, checked her equipment, and started walking up the hill. Her lightweight backpack, as the police would later determine from store receipts, contained a standard set for a day trip: 2 bottles of water, energy bars, a light windbreaker, and the professional camera she had come all this way for. Kelly wanted to get a bird's-eye view of the valley at a time when the sun was at its zenith. Specimen Ridge is not a typical hiking trail. There are no paved paths or clear signs at every turn. It's a wilderness area where you have to navigate by barely visible animal trails and visual markers on the horizon. At 11 o'clock 40 minutes, Kelly's mother's phone vibrated. "It's incredibly quiet here. The connection is going down." These were the last words Kelly sent to the outside world. Her mother replied almost instantly, asking her to be careful, but the message remained undelivered. As the sun began to set and Kelly did not return to the car or contact the checkpoint at 8 o'clock as agreed, her parents felt the first wave of panic. They knew their daughter never broke her schedule without warning. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, as dusk fell over Yellowstone, they contacted the park's emergency services. The ranger on duty accepted the call, but explained that night searches on such a difficult terrain were impossible due to the high risk to rescuers. The forest at night belongs to predators, not people. The search operation started the next morning, August 13th, at 5 o'clock 30 minutes. The scale was unprecedented for that season. A helicopter equipped with thermal imagers capable of detecting human body heat even through dense undergrowth was sent into the sky. On the ground, dog teams and horse patrols worked to go where equipment was powerless. The main problem was that Specimen Ridge is an open space where the wind constantly changes direction, breaking up the scent trail. The dogs circled in place, unable to pick up a clear vector of the girl's movement. The version of a wild animal attack was one of the first to be worked out by investigators. The Lamar Valley is known as the territory of a large population of grizzly bears. Experienced trackers examined every bush, every patch of soft soil in search of signs of struggle, blood, or torn clothing. But the ground was clean. No signs of a struggle, no traces of being dragged. It was as if Kelly Brooks had simply vanished into the thin mountain air. On the 3rd day of the search, the tension reached a peak. Dozens of volunteers joined the operation, lining up in a chain and combing the slopes meter by meter. They checked every crevice, every hole, every rock outcropping. According to the coordinator of the search team, they were working in a state of extreme exhaustion, but kept going, hoping to find the girl injured, but alive. The heat during the day was followed by a sharp cold at night, which reduced the chances of survival with each passing hour. The breakthrough, which turned out to be the only one and painful, happened on the 5th day. A group of volunteers descending into a deep rocky gorge 2 miles from Kelly's intended route noticed a small black object stuck between 2 boulders. It was a plastic camera lens cap. Kelly's father recognized it immediately. There was a small marker on the inside, which his daughter had varnished to prevent her from losing the item. The discovery gave hope, but also raised even more questions. The lid was in a place where a tourist should not have entered without special equipment. Forensic experts carefully examined the area around the discovery. They assumed that Kelly could have slipped on a loose slope and fallen into the gorge. Climbers descended to the very bottom of the fault, risking their lives, but found no body, no camera, no backpack. Only a small black lid lying there as a mute witness that the girl was nearby. The trail broke off at this very point. The dogs that were brought to the gorge were nervous, but did not lead them further. After 2 weeks of intensive searching, the park's resources were exhausted. No new clues appeared. The thermal imagers showed only deer and bears, and the volunteers were falling down from exhaustion. The park's management was forced to make a difficult decision to switch the operation to a passive phase. In the official report, a copy of which was received by the grieving parents, the cause of the disappearance was preliminarily called an accident in a remote area, or a fall from a height, followed by the body being hidden by natural factors. Kelly Brooks' case has become a stack of papers in the Ranger archives. Her name has been added to the long list of those who have entered the Yellowstone wilderness and never found their way back. The last thing that remained of her was a message about silence. And this silence swallowed her whole, leaving her parents with only endless waiting and a black lens cap found among the cold stones. No one could have imagined then that this story did not end in death, but had only just begun. 7 years of silence had passed, and for the Brooks family, it was a sentence without appeal. November of 2021 brought blistering winds and early snowfalls to the town of Cody, Wyoming, blocking some of the mountain passes. This town, located just 50 miles from the eastern entrance to Yellowstone National Park, usually lives off tourists, but in late fall, only the locals remain. On November 16th, an ordinary Tuesday, the town was going about its daily routine until, at 14 hours and 12 minutes past 4, a security camera at the entrance to the Buffalo Bill grocery store captured a figure that would change the course of history forever. The grainy footage shows a woman slowly approaching the automatic doors. Her gait was unsteady, shuffling, as if each step caused her physical pain or required excessive effort. She was dressed for the weather, a dirty gray men's jacket several sizes too big, with worn jeans covered with oil and dirt stains peeking out from underneath. On her feet were old sneakers, completely unsuitable for the November cold of Wyoming. She pulled her hood down so deeply that her face turned into a dark blur, hidden from the camera lenses. Witnesses later interviewed by police described her behavior in one word: shadow. She moved between the rows of household chemicals, trying to take up as little space as possible, squeezing into the shelves as other customers walked by. According to a sales clerk who was putting the goods in the next row, the woman did not look up. She looked like a person who was afraid of being noticed, but at the same time had to perform some important task. Her hands trembled as she took bottles of aggressive cleaning products from the shelf: chlorine, rust removers, concentrated detergents. At 14 hours and 30 minutes, she approached checkout number 4. The strange purchases were placed on the moving belt: 3 bottles of the cheapest bleach, a pack of hard sponges, and 5 cans of canned meat in the lowest price category. The cashier, a middle-aged woman, later noted in her testimony that the stranger emanated a specific, musty smell, a mixture of dampness, old unwashed clothes, and chemicals. When the store employee announced the total amount, the stranger began frantically groping through her jacket pockets. Her movements became abrupt and panicked. It was at this point that the tipping point occurred. The woman did not find the money. She froze. Her face, which was momentarily exposed to the light of the lamp, turned deadly pale. Her lips turned blue and her eyes rolled back. Without a sound, she sank to the floor, collapsing right next to the cash register. The store staff immediately called the emergency services. A paramedic team that arrived 8 minutes later recorded critically low blood pressure and a thready pulse. The woman was rushed to West Park Regional Hospital. In the emergency room, doctors were confronted with a picture described in medical reports as a state of extreme neglect. When the patient's dirty clothes were removed, the staff was shocked by the state of her body. She weighed critically little for her height, and her ribs protruded through her thin, almost transparent skin. The diagnosis was clear: severe emaciation and chronic dehydration. But it was not the effects of starvation that raised the most questions, but the marks on the skin. The woman's body was covered with numerous scars of different ages. On her back and forearms, there were scars that looked like burn marks and deep cuts that had not healed without proper medical care. When the patient regained consciousness, her behavior changed from passive to aggressive and defensive. She refused to give her name. According to the nurse on duty, the woman huddled in the corner of the bed, pulled the blanket up to her nose and covered her head with her hands, creating a kind of protective cocoon. She did not answer the doctor's questions, only repeated the same phrase, which was recorded in the examination report. "Let me go home, otherwise they will be angry." Her voice was hoarse, broken, as if she had not spoken in full voice for a long time. Her eyes showed animal terror, not of the doctors, but of someone waiting for her outside. Due to the lack of documents and inappropriate behavior, the doctors called the police. The officer who arrived at the ward tried to identify her, but the woman continued to remain silent or pleaded to be released to avoid punishment. Given her condition and the suspicion that she might have been a victim of violence or escaped from the place of illegal detention, the officer decided to perform a fingerprinting procedure right in the hospital using a mobile scanner. This was a standard procedure for unidentified persons who enter medical facilities in a helpless state. The scan took a few minutes. The data was sent to a nationwide identification system. The officer expected to find matches with databases of homeless people or petty offenders. However, the response that came back 40 minutes later forced the dispatcher on duty at the station to ask for the result twice. The system produced a 100% match with a file that had a status of closed, much probable death. The fingerprints belonged to Kelly Brooks, the same girl who disappeared in August 2014 in the Specimen Ridge area. The same girl whose search lasted for weeks and ended in nothing. The same girl whose parents mourned for 7 years, believing that her body had been left forever in the deep gorge of Yellowstone. The news reached the detective of the Major Crimes Unit instantly. It was unbelievable, but the facts were inexorable. Kelly Brooks was alive. She was in a hospital room in Cody, just a few dozen miles from where she had disappeared. But the creature shivering under the hospital blanket bore little resemblance to the smiling 18-year-old student from the police orientation. Her eyes were dim, her hands were covered with calluses and dirt that had been eaten into her skin over the years, and her wrists showed pale ring marks, marks that only shackles or tight ropes leave when worn for long periods of time. The police realized one thing: Kelly Brooks hadn't been wandering the forest for 7 years. Someone was holding her, and that someone was very close. The news that the patient in the intensive care unit was Kelly Brooks, who disappeared 7 years ago, changed the status of West Park Hospital in a matter of hours. Patrol cars surrounded the building, and detectives from the Wyoming State Major Crimes Unit arrived at the ICU expecting answers that would solve the mystery of the 7-year disappearance, but instead encountered a deafening, impenetrable wall of silence. Kelly, who was 25 years old at the time, was physically in the room, but mentally she was somewhere very far away. in a place that still held her in its grip. The first attempt at interrogation, recorded in the official report, lasted less than 10 minutes and ended in complete failure. The detective tried to make eye contact, called her by name, but the woman did not respond. She sat on the bed, wrapping her arms around her knees and rocking from side to side in a monotonous rhythm. Her eyes were unfocused, directed at one point on the floor. The only thing that broke the silence was a soft, barely audible whisper that she repeated like a mantra. "I have to finish the list. I have to finish the list." This phrase obviously referred to the piece of paper she was found with and indicated an obsession with completing the task at all costs. The medical examination conducted by forensic experts the next morning revealed a horrific map of suffering on her body. The doctors noted characteristic ring scars on her wrists and ankles. The skin in these areas was rough, deformed, and had a pale tint, indicating prolonged, possibly years of wearing shackles or tight ropes. Some of the scars were old, others looked fresher, as if she had been fixed regularly. But the most shocking finding was the marks on her back in the upper part of the shoulder blades. Experts counted several round burns with clear edges. Their geometry and size perfectly matched the shape of a hot car cigarette lighter. These were not accidental injuries, but traces of systematic torture. Kelly's psychological condition was no less worrisome to the doctors than her physical condition. The psychologist on duty, who observed the patient through a mirror, noted in his report a strange reaction to external stimuli every time the ward door was opened. Kelly did not look at the person entering. She instantly pulled her head into her shoulders, closed her eyes, and froze, stopping breathing. It was the reaction of a creature accustomed to expecting pain or punishment for any sound. The specialist's conclusion stated, "The subject demonstrates classic signs of complete submission and severe Stockholm Syndrome. She is not afraid of us, the police or doctors. She is panicked by the consequences of her absence in a certain place. She is convinced that she is being watched even here." It was only on the third day, when doctors had stabilized her physical condition, that Kelly's mother was allowed to enter the ward. The detectives hoped that the appearance of a loved one would break through the barrier of dissociation. The meeting took place under the supervision of medical staff. According to a nurse who was present in the room, the mother rushed to the bed in tears, trying to hug her daughter. But Kelly's reaction was the opposite of what was expected. She didn't cry with joy, didn't reach out her arms in response. She leaned back against the wall, her eyes widening in horror. Instead of words of love or relief, Kelly began to apologize quickly, feverishly. Her voice, hoarse and weak, broke into a scream. "I didn't run away, Mom. I didn't run away," she repeated, trembling all over. "I just fell. I was dizzy. Tell them I didn't mean to. Tell them I didn't try to leave." She spoke as if she were justifying herself to someone invisible and omnipotent who had the right to punish her for her weakness. It was from these fragmentary, fear-filled phrases that the detectives managed to glean the first real facts. It became clear that the version about wandering in the woods was false from the very beginning. Kelly referred to them in the plural. She spoke of darkness, of stairs going down, and of a basement where there was no time. Her confused words painted a picture not of the wilderness, but of a man-made prison. She was not in a different state or in the middle of nowhere. Her behavior, her fear that they will be angry for her unfulfilled shopping list, indicated that her place of detention was somewhere very close, within walking distance of the very store where she had fainted. She was a prisoner in the heart of civilization. While the medical staff at West Park Hospital tried to stabilize the victim's psychological state, the investigative team led by Park County detectives began working in reverse. The main task was to recreate the path that Kelly Brooks had traveled on that cold November Tuesday before collapsing at the supermarket checkout. These were critical hours, as police still did not know whether the kidnapper acted alone or was an organized group that could have tried to cover their tracks or disappeared. Detectives seized hard drives from the video surveillance servers of not only the Buffalo Bill grocery store itself, but also all private and municipal cameras within a 3-mile radius. Analysis of the recordings by the technical department allowed them to build the woman's route. The video clearly showed that she came on foot. She did not get out of the car in the parking lot, did not get off the bus. Her figure appeared on street surveillance cameras from the southeastern outskirts of Cody, an area built up with 1-story private houses, with large adjoining plots fenced off by high fences. She walked along the roadside with her head down and never stopped, as if her movement had been programmed. The key evidence in the case was not found on the street, but in the pocket of Kelly's dirty jeans. The officer who was inventorying her personal belongings found a small, badly crumpled piece of paper. It was a shopping list. Graphology experts who were urgently sent a scan of the document confirmed that the handwriting belonged to Kelly Brooks. However, the letters were crooked, the pressure was uneven, and the lines were sliding down. The graphologist's report stated that this nature of the writing was indicative of writing under extreme stress or physical exhaustion, possibly with trembling hands. But the most important detail was not the text, but the back of the paper. The sheet had been torn off from some larger document, and a fragment of a pale, almost worn-out ink stamp was preserved on its back. Forensic scientists at the lab used spectral analysis to restore the image. Through the stains of dirt and grease, a logo appeared: Red Canyon Repairs. It was the name of a small auto repair shop located on the outskirts of the city. The detectives immediately went to the owner of the repair shop. An inspection showed that the paper on which Kelly had made the list was part of an old order form or promotional flyer that might have been given to a customer with a check. The police seized the service's customer database for the past few years and began filtering for addresses that matched Kelly's driving pattern. The system produced one exact match. The address was only 1.5 miles from the supermarket, a distance that the exhausted woman could have covered on foot in 30 to 40 minutes. The house belonged to the Wayne couple, 35-year-old Simon and 33-year-old Alice. Detectives conducting preliminary reconnaissance saw a picture absolutely typical of the neighborhood. A neat 1-story house covered with light siding, a well-kept lawn, a minivan parked near the garage. No high barbed wire fences, no bars on the ground floor windows. It was the perfect cover, a house that looked so ordinary that it became invisible. Neighborhood interviews were conducted with the utmost care, under the guise of checking a report of a burglary in the area, so as not to alarm the suspects. Residents of the street described the Waynes as perfectly quiet neighbors. The interrogation reports contain evidence that the couple was a bit religious, always greeted each other, but never engaged in long conversations. They did not throw loud parties and almost never had guests or relatives over. Their lives seemed to be locked in a vacuum. However, one of the neighbors, an elderly man who lived across the street, gave a testimony that made the detectives shudder. He said that in recent years he had occasionally seen a young girl in the Waynes' yard. She rarely showed up, mostly in the early morning or late evening, and was always doing menial tasks, taking out the trash to the bins, sweeping the backyard, or clearing snow in winter. The witness noted in a conversation with the investigator that the girl was always dressed in baggy clothes and never raised her head when cars drove by. When asked why this did not arouse his suspicions, the man replied that he thought she was a poor relative or a hired helper from a dysfunctional family whom the Waynes took in out of pity or religious motives. She looked like she was just doing her job and didn't want to be touched. No one on the street had any idea that 1.5 miles away, in a house with a perfectly mowed lawn, could be the man they had been searching for across the state for 7 years. This everyday evil was the most terrifying discovery of that evening. On November 17, 2021, at precisely 5 o'clock in the morning, the silence of Cody's residential neighborhood was shattered by the sound of a battering ram. The special response team that obtained the search warrant for the house at 142 Elm Street was operating under a high-risk protocol. Intelligence indicated that it was likely that the suspects might be armed or attempt to destroy evidence. The perimeter of the house was surrounded in seconds, and the light of the searchlights cut through the pre-dawn darkness, leaving no escape routes. The assault was lightning fast. Officers in full gear kicked down the front door and stormed inside, shouting commands. Simon and Alice Wayne were arrested in their second-floor bedroom. They were still in bed. According to the reports of the raid team, the suspects did not physically resist, but their reaction was radically different from the behavior of ordinary people in such a situation. Instead of fear, panic, or confusion, the couple's faces showed cold, arrogant indignation. Alice screamed about unlawful intrusion and violation of the right to privacy, demanding an explanation, as if the police had burst in because of improper parking, not because of suspected kidnapping. Simon remained silent, drilling the officers with a hateful look as the handcuffs were snapped around his wrists. While the suspects were being led to patrol cars under the sights of body cameras, forensic scientists and detectives began a detailed examination of the premises. The first floor of the house gave the impression of absolute, even depressing, normality. It was a typical home of a middle-class American family. Light walls, upholstered furniture in the living room, perfectly clean carpets. On the mantelpiece were evenly lined up frames with wedding photos, where Simon and Alice smiled against the backdrop of mountain landscapes. The kitchen smelled of coffee and lemon detergent. Not a single detail of the interior hinted at the fact that a serious crime had been committed within these walls for years. One of the detectives' attention was drawn to the kitchen. During a thorough inspection of the floor, he noticed deep, distinctive scratches in the linoleum near a massive two-door refrigerator in the corner. The marks indicated that the heavy appliance had been moved from place to place on a regular basis. When the two officers pushed the refrigerator aside, they found a part of the wall behind it that was different in texture. It was a hidden door, cleverly disguised as part of the general kitchen paneling. It had no handle on the outside, only a mortise lock, the key to which was found a minute later on the nightstand next to Simon's bed. When the lock clicked and the door swung open, stale, heavy air poured out of the opening. It was a smell that could not be mistaken for anything else, a mixture of dampness, mold, unwashed human flesh, and cleaning chemicals. Behind the door was a steep wooden staircase leading into complete darkness. The detectives descended slowly, lighting the way with tactical flashlights. What they saw downstairs made even veteran police officers stop for a few seconds to realize the reality. The basement had been converted into a full-fledged residential prison, isolated from the outside world. The room had no windows, and the walls were covered with professional soundproof panels that absorbed any sound. In the center of the room, on the bare concrete floor, there was a thin, dirty mattress with grayed-out linen. In the corner was a plastic bucket with a lid that served as a toilet. Next to it were several plastic bottles of water. But it was not the living conditions that caused the most horror, but the methods of psychological control. On the walls, at the eye level of the person sitting on the mattress, were sheets of A-frame paper. The text was laconic and brutal. Speak only when asked. Look at the floor. Gratitude for food is mandatory. These papers, yellowed with time, testified to a system built on the complete suppression of the victim's will. Near the mattress, a thick metal ring was firmly embedded in the concrete floor. A massive rusty chain was attached to it, with open shackles at the end. The length of the chain was calculated with sadistic precision. It allowed the prisoner to reach the bucket in the corner or lie down on the mattress, but did not allow her to approach the stairs closer than 3 feet. It was a zone of absolute restriction, where every step was controlled by the length of the metal links. Forensic experts describing the crime scene found in the corner a small stack of old children's books with coloring pages filled with chaotic strokes, probably the only things Kelly tried to entertain herself with in the first years of her imprisonment. saving her mind from disintegration. And on a shelf high above the ceiling, where the victim could not reach, was a transparent sealed bag. It contained neatly folded clothes, a faded t-shirt, denim shorts, and lightweight sneakers. These were the clothes that 18-year-old Kelly Brooks had worn when she left home in August 2014. They lay there like a trophy, like a museum piece from a past life that had been stolen from her. For the first 48 hours after their arrest, Simon and Alice Wayne tried to play out a scenario in front of the investigation that the detectives called the Theater of Absurd Mercy. In separate interrogation rooms, unable to agree on the details, they nevertheless adhered to a single, pre-prepared legend. The couple claimed to have found Kelly Brooks in the woods in a semi-conscious state, frightened and disoriented, and decided to provide her with shelter, guided solely by their Christian duty. According to them, the girl herself begged them not to inform the police, and they, being people of deep faith and compassion, simply could not refuse a lost soul. This version of the Good Samaritans crumbled into dust on the third day of the investigation, when specialists from the cybercrime department joined the case. The Waynes' home computer seized during the search, despite attempts to format the hard drive, became the key that opened the real abyss of their intentions. Experts managed to recover a hidden system partition that contained a folder with the neutral name Repair. The date of its creation was May 2014, 3 full months before Kelly Brooks even planned her trip to Yellowstone. The contents of the folder shocked even the state's attorney. There were no photos of interior design or plans to renovate the living room. Instead, the files contained detailed engineering plans for the basement, load calculations for the concrete screed to install anchor rings, ventilation plans to keep sounds out, and drawings for a false wall in the kitchen. This was not a storage room, but a design for a detention cell, designed with the coolness of an architect. Bank statements that detectives compared with the dates in the files finally buried the spontaneity theory. In June 2014, Simon Wayne made a series of purchases in construction hypermarkets and specialized online stores. The list of goods included industrial-grade soundproofing panels used in recording studios or shooting ranges, reinforced steel door hinges capable of withstanding battering rams, and specific chemicals. The latter, according to a toxicologist, could be used for the artisanal manufacture of powerful sedative mixtures. The basement was waiting for its prisoner long before the Waynes even saw Kelly's face. The investigation established that the Wayne couple did not come to the park that August morning to enjoy nature. They came to hunt, gathering evidence of their movements was helped by an incredible accident. A detective who was reviewing the archives of unsolved cases in the park area came across materials about a petty theft at a gas station in the town of Cook City that occurred in August 2014. The old surveillance footage, which miraculously survived on the local police server, shows the Waynes' dark blue minivan in the background. The video became irrefutable evidence of stalking. The Waynes' car was parked for almost an hour. The couple was sitting inside, watching the flow of tourists. The camera captured the moment when Kelly Brooks' silver sedan pulled into the gas station. As soon as she got out to pay for the fuel, Alice got out of the minivan. She walked past Kelly, pretending to go to the restroom, but the video clearly shows her slowing down, scanning the girl's physique, her clothes, and most importantly, the lack of companions in the car. Alice turned to Simon, gave him a brief nod, and as Kelly pulled out of the gas station, the minivan followed. They drove her over 40 miles through mountainous serpentines, waiting for the perfect moment. Under the pressure of this evidence, digital diagrams, receipts, and a video recording, Simon Wayne changed his defense tactics. His tone turned from compassionate to cynical and dry. In the interrogation room, he first used a term that would later appear in all court documents: perfect material. He admitted that they were not looking for a specific person, they were looking for a type. A young, physically fit woman traveling alone and unable to put up any serious physical resistance. Kelly Brooks just fit perfectly into the parameters of their terrible casting call. The capture on the Specimen Ridge Trail was not the result of a chance encounter, but an elaborate act. According to Simon's words recorded in the protocol, they knew that this part of the trail was sparsely populated. Alice went ahead, while Simon kept his distance, hiding in the folds of the terrain. When Kelly approached, Alice acted out a fall scene, pretending to twist her ankle badly and be unable to walk. It was a trap designed to appeal to basic human empathy. Kelly, seeing a woman in distress, did what any normal person would do. She bent down to offer help. At that moment, her kindness became her sentence. Simon, who came up behind her inaudibly, did not use brute force or stoning, as is often the case in spontaneous attacks. He acted technologically. The investigation seized an old but working high-powered stun gun from their garage. A single discharge to the neck instantly paralyzed the victim, not even giving him a chance to scream. There was no rescue that they lied about at first. There was only the cold calculation of predators who had driven their prey away. In his digital notes found in that same hidden folder, Simon called this plot Project Isolation. Its goal was not just to kidnap, but to create a human being from scratch, a being without a past, without a will, completely dependent on his creators. They deliberately chose Kelly, knowing that her disappearance in such a difficult area as Specimen Ridge would be attributed to an accident or bear attack. They had calculated everything from the response time of rangers to the depth of snow cover in winter, which would hide any traces. The chain, embedded in the concrete floor of the basement on Elm Street, was purchased and secured back in July. Its length was calibrated so that the prisoner could exist but could not live. When Kelly Brooks tied the laces of her boots that morning in preparation for the hike, her prison was already ready. It stood empty, waiting for someone to fill the space with her fear. This was not a spontaneous evil born of a sick moment. It was a long-term, calculated engineering work on depriving a person of their freedom, implemented with the precision of a clockwork. The testimony that the detectives managed to get from Kelly Brooks was not a coherent story. They were fragments of horror that doctors and investigators collected over the course of many weeks of intensive care. What was revealed in these reports horrified even police veterans who were used to brutality. The story of 7 years in the basement on Elm Street turned out to be not just a chronicle of physical imprisonment, but a detailed account of the methodical, calculated destruction of human personality that the Wayne couple turned into their family project. Kelly recounted the first months of her stay in the soundproof cell. She screamed for hours, days, until she tore her ligaments so badly that she started coughing up blood. No one came. The walls absorbed every sound, leaving her with only her own helplessness. When the voice disappeared, another phase began, a silent terror. She remembered Simon coming down to her in the dead of night. He didn't beat her, didn't rape her in the usual sense of the word. He would just sit on a chair in the corner, turn off the main light, leaving only a dim nightlight, and stare at her for hours. He enjoyed her animal fear, watching her tremble under the thin blanket, waiting for the blow that never came. This psychological torture of the unknown broke the will more effectively than physical pain. But the most terrible overseer, according to Kelly, was not Simon, but Alice. It was a woman who looked like a modest housewife in public who, in the basement, invented tasks designed to erase the line between man and animal. The protocols record an episode that Kelly described with particular horror. She was forced to eat from a plastic dog bowl while kneeling with her hands behind her back. If she tried to get up or spilled even a drop, she was deprived of food for 2 days. Alice called it training. In the interrogation transcripts, there are moments labeled as long pauses and refusal to describe due to repeated traumatic shock. There were orders that Kelly could not even talk about with a psychologist. She was forced to perform actions so humiliating and dirty that over time she stopped identifying herself as Kelly Brooks. The name disappeared. She became the Thing, a sexless, nameless creature whose sole purpose of existence was to satisfy the morbid whims of her masters and avoid punishment. The control was total and based on lies which the victim's broken psyche believed without question. The Waynes convinced the girl that during one of the procedures, when she was unconscious, they implanted a microchip under her skin. They claimed that the device not only transmitted her location to within an inch of her life, but also her heart rate and adrenaline levels. "We know when you're scared, and we know when you're lying," Simon told her. It was technological nonsense, but for a person who hadn't seen the sun in years, it became an absolute reality. She was afraid to even think about escaping, believing that her thoughts could be scanned as well. Kelly recalled the day she was first taken to the city. It was 4 years after her abduction. It was a brutal test of obedience. She was put in the back of a minivan with tinted windows and driven to a busy Cody street. "I saw people," she whispered to the interrogator, staring at the wall of the room. "I saw a woman with a wheelchair. I saw a man drinking coffee, but I couldn't scream. There was a glass wall between me and them. I knew my voice was the trigger." She sat motionless like a doll, hands folded in her lap, knowing that the slightest movement would lead to consequences worse than death. The main lever that kept her subdued for all these 7 years was not fear for her own life. She had long dreamed of dying. The lever was her family. Simon and Alice regularly showed her photos of her parents' house. The pictures were fresh, taken from different angles. Her father walking out onto the porch in the morning, her mother carrying the groceries in the evening, the view from the window of a car driving by their yard. The Waynes knew her father's work schedule, her mother's route to church, and even the names of their neighbors. "If you try to run away, if you give a sign, if you just look at someone pleading, we won't kill you," Simon explained to her calmly, showing her another photo. Slowly. "We're going to videotape it, and you'll watch it for the rest of your life." This conviction held her tighter than any steel shackles. She sincerely believed that her escape would be a death sentence for those closest to her. She endured hell to protect them. Therefore, the incident in the store in Cody was not an act of rebellion or a heroic rescue attempt. As the press initially believed Kelly did not plan to escape that day, Alice sent her to get specific cleaning products because she was sick and did not want to leave the house, and Simon was at work. The thing received orders, a list and time to complete. She was going to the store to complete the task and return to the basement to rescue her parents. Her collapse at the checkout counter was not a choice, but a physiological failure. Her body, exhausted from years of malnutrition, constant stress, and living in survival mode, simply failed at a critical moment. She fell to the supermarket floor, not because she wanted to escape, but because she was physically unable to withstand the strain of trying to be an obedient slave. The trial of the Wayne couple, which began in May of 2022, instantly became a national sensation. Dozens of reporters' vans surrounded the courthouse, and the line of people waiting to enter the courtroom stretched for a block. The public expected to see a united front in defense of the two monsters who had kept the girl in the basement for years, but this alliance collapsed before the first blow of the judge's gavel was heard. After reading the prosecution's case file, Alice Wayne realized that the amount of evidence gathered, from digital diagrams of the basement to video footage from the gas station, would guarantee her a life sentence or even the death penalty, given the state's aggravating circumstances laws. A week before the hearing, she made a plea deal with the investigators. In exchange for the possibility of a reduced sentence, Alice agreed to give full, comprehensive testimony against her husband. In the courtroom, Alice Wayne played the role of the first victim. Dressed in a modest gray suit, she wept as she testified, claiming that Simon was a domestic tyrant who manipulated her, intimidated her, and forced her to participate in his sick fantasies. "This was his idea. I was as afraid of him as she was," Alice told the jury, carefully avoiding looking toward the bench where her husband was sitting. She insisted that it was her influence that made Simon start letting Kelly out of the basement to do chores, trying to present it as an act of mercy. Alice categorically denied taking the initiative in the torture, shifting all responsibility for the physical and psychological abuse to her husband. However, the prosecutor did not allow her to completely whitewash her reputation. He presented to the court the restored correspondence of the couple and joint electronic orders of chemicals, proving that Alice was not a victim, but an equal cold partner in this crime. Simon Wayne did not say a word during the entire trial. He sat motionless, with an indifferent expression on his face. When Alice, choking on tears, accused him of all his sins, only a cold, barely noticeable smile appeared on his lips. He did not look at his wife as a traitor, but as a failed experiment that had gotten out of control. His silence was louder than any excuses. The court's verdict was harsh but unequal. Simon Wayne was sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of early release. He was to die in prison. Alice Wayne, thanks to a plea bargain with the investigation, received 25 years in prison with the right to apply for clemency after serving the full term. For the Brooks family, this was a painful blow. The woman who had spent years inventing humiliating torture for their daughter theoretically had a chance to be released someday. The ending of this story was not the happy ending the press had hoped for. Kelly Brooks physically returned to her parents' home, but psychologically, she still remained in the soundproofed basement on Elm Street. The rehabilitation process was painfully slow. Doctors recorded deep post-traumatic reactions that changed her everyday behavior beyond recognition. Kelly would flinch at any loud sound, whether it was a slamming door or a ringing phone. She flatly refused to use metal cutlery because the sound of metal clinking made her instantly associated with Simon's tools and chain. She ate only with plastic spoons. But the worst thing for her parents was something else. Every time she took food from the refrigerator or went to the restroom, the adult woman would stop, look down at the floor, and ask her mother for permission in a quiet, trembling voice. The parents, who had been mourning their dead daughter for 7 years, were now forced to learn to live with the stranger, returned to them by the police. They saw her face, heard her voice, but Kelly's gaze often became glassy and empty. At such moments, she simply looked through the walls as if she were back there in the darkness, waiting for the next order from her masters. She was free, but her mind continued to live by the rules printed on a piece of paper in the basement.